I'm going to introduce Genevieve DeBose, who was in the multiple subjects credential program 2001-2002. Has gone on to do wonderful things in teaching, except for this year and with the U.S. Department of Education. So she's going to take it from there, tell you more about herself and what she's doing, and then lead the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicki.
You're welcome.
So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Like Vicki said, my name is Genevieve DeBose. I'm a teacher most recently in the Bronx, and I started teaching in Los Angeles, and then taught in Oakland for many years, and then moved to the Bronx about 6 years ago, and I've been teaching there since. And this year, I teach middle grades, mainly language arts and social studies. That's where my heart is, my passion, young adolescents. And I'm a proud Mills alumni, so this was actually my most favorite schooling experience of all time, was being here at Mills. So, and I learned a lot from my experience in my and I'm working this year at the U.S. Department of Education. I'm a teaching ambassador fellow, which is a really neat program that the department has where they bring teachers together, a cohort of teachers from across the country, to come and learn about education policy and share that with other teachers, and then to be a teacher voice at the department. So there's 5 of us who live in Washington for the year, and then there's 10 classroom fellows who stay in their classrooms across the country and do this policy work part-time. And the purpose is really just because we as teachers need to have a voice in teacher policy, and there's lots of policies and laws being written that affect us and affect our students, but if we don't have a say in it, it's kind of like there's something missing. So that's why I'm here, and I am working mainly on middle grades at the department this year. The middle grades reform and thinking about ways that we can better meet the needs of young adolescents. And part of what you may or may not know, that on Wednesday, the Secretary launched a national conversation on the teaching profession. And in that conversation, we're really thinking about ways that we can transform our profession and ways to make it more sustainable, to give opportunities for teachers to grow, and to think about things like teacher compensation, how we structure our classes, how our schools are structured, school environment, all of those types of things. And so that's the document that you received, and I'm here to kind of really hear what your thoughts are on that and facilitate a conversation around that. A really honest conversation, so all perspectives are welcome, and positive, negative, neutral, doesn't matter. So I hope they will be honest and feedback. But before we jump into that, I would love to actually go around and have you all introduce yourselves and just share your name, what program you're in, and in one word, why you are becoming a teacher, or why you teach. It's hard. It's very hard. Can we start with you?
Sure. I'm Natasha, one word. Natasha Lowy. I'm with the single subject doing art distribution, empathy.
Empathy?
Yeah.
I'm Erin Kurtz. I'm a multiple subject, and my word would be care.
I'm Gabriel Steinberg, and I'm doing a single subject credential English in power or empower.
My name is Lisa Kerman. I'm doing the single subject credential program in English as well. And one word for why I'm teaching would be empowerment.
My name is Matt Polly. I'm a single subject history, and my word is love.
I'm Natalie. I am in the multiple subject credential program here, and my word would be civility.
Stability?
Civility.
Civility.
My name is Scott Adams, also in the multiple subject credential program, and the word I would use is moral. Moral.
Dave Stone, multiple subject, joy.
I'm
I'm Renee Pinheiro. I'm doing a single subject in Spanish, and my word would be passion.
Hi, I'm Alana Bauer. I'm doing single subject English, and my word would be ethics.
I'm Becca Coleman. I'm multiple subjects, and my word is also love. My name is Danielle Cuizo. I'm in multiple subjects, and hope.
My name is Pat Wright. I have multiple subjects, and I come from a special ed background. I work with deaf and hard hearing. And I was going to say passion. That's been taken, and I can still have passion, but I'm also going to say change.
And, my name is Connor Snow. I'm single subject science, and my word would be beauty. Just get together on the side.
I'm Genevieve. I was multiple subject, and my word would be justice. Do folks kind of better on it? Are you all observing, or?
We're observing, but
You can still introduce yourselves here.
Hi, I'm Julie Oppenheimer and multiple subject credential, and it would be need.
My name is Jamie Bowman. I'm multiple subjects, and my word would also be passion. Vicki, do you want to share your word?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Okay, just because, I'll say syntax. Multiple subjects will get that.
Thank you. I'm also going to pass around a sign-up sheet, and if you could just put your information. One of the teaching fellows from last year started a newsletter called Teaching Matters. It has really good resources and things in it. If you want to get that, you can put your email. If you don't, you don't have to. Okay, so we have about a little over an hour, and what we're going to do in this next hour is dive into this document and get your thoughts and your feedback on it. So the way that we'll structure it first, did everybody have a chance to read this? Okay. So we will kind of spend the first 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes looking just at the first page, the challenge and the vision, and getting your initial reactions on that. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time in smaller groups, kind of diving a little bit more deeply into one of the other sections. And you all will share some recommendations for folks in the department around those sections, and I'll tell you more about that. And then we'll think a little bit collectively about ways that we can, as teachers, be involved in these conversations locally. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the department's plan is in terms of this document and where they're going with it. So, any questions about the format? Okay, so we'll dive in just to the first section, the introduction, and I'll be typing like wild, so I'm listening, but I'm also typing. So I just want to ask you first for any general reactions to the challenge or the vision, anything that struck you as powerful or frightening, or any reactions either way about what you read in the challenge or the vision. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I mean, so I have a lot of thoughts about the introduction in general, but I made a particular note when there was mention of comparing ourselves to the other high-performing countries. And that actually, now that I'm thinking of it, that probably should have been somewhere closer to my word, just because I feel like a lot of times our country is very egocentric, and we don't look to other countries for possibilities of positive change, and we don't look for better ideas from other countries because we are very much concerned with maintaining our sense of being great on our own. And so I really like that reference, and I really think that there should be more of an effort placed on not just collaboration within our society, but collaboration on more of a global level as well.
Going off of that and the positive moving forward thing, under the vision, I really like that the dance was included. I feel like it's important for teachers to have kind of a place to go so we can strive to be greater. And obviously, competency teachers is great right after that. Helps. Every bit helps.
I wanted to go off of that as well. It's really great to see that their compensation would be measured in part by student performance, not by how many years they were there. But my question is, how would we measure this? And would it then push standardized testing more? Or like, how would we measure student performance and student success in relation to the teacher's performance?
And kind of that links with what Vanessa was saying in terms of how do we define, I mean, I guess in an economic sense or in a standardized test sense, we're talking about high-performing countries, but what measure are we using to compare that? And, you know, which facets of those high-performing countries or of the education systems that are in those high-performing countries are we trying to strive for? Are we, because, I mean, a lot of these so-called high-performing countries have different, you know, their student population is different, their student population has different needs, maybe it's more homogenous. So I'm just wondering what we're looking at when we say high-performing. Is it the ability to memorize? Is it the ability to make more money? What are we talking about?
And connected to that first line of, in order to prepare young people for an increasingly competitive global economy, I think is somewhat problematic, given that I'd rather that we do think that we are always in competition with somebody else, and high performing means that there are also places that are not high performing, and what does that mean about those places? And why would we be looking to, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not having really great education practices, so just that language in there.
Yeah, I think we talk about a lot that currently schools are focusing on preparing workers, right, for the global economy, for the economy, and instead maybe a lot of what we talk about is preparing citizens to be participants in democracy.
I totally agree on that, what you just said that. I would love to see something in here about like students reaching their own self-identified potential, about citizenship, about like working in their families and community, like using their education to further their own interests. And I guess the one thing that is still confusing to me is that we say we want to teach all students well, but we also say that we're going to race to the top, and not everyone can fit at the top. So how do those two paradigms, like, they seem contradictory. I think what happens is that only certain people make it to the top, and we say we want everyone to make it up to the top, but our global economy is capitalist, so there's only, you know, it's sort of.
And that language race to the top, and it implies leaving somebody behind.
Right.
So, like, what kind of messages does it need to students?
Right.
But I do want to add in sort of your two comments in your last one, that is, it is a capitalist global economy, and while I may personally not agree with that, I think it is important that we are making sure that students do have the skills to succeed in the current structure. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but we have to still remember that in order to initiate the change and establish the citizenship, we must also recognize the structures in place and have people that are going to succeed in those structures that may not all be of the same mindset. They want to be able to work in a high-performing economy.
So the key word then is more prepare, and like what does that mean? Prepare for an increasing kind of global economy. That doesn't, I guess if we focus on that, then it could mean doing all sorts of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that we're only, that this means that we just have to teach students how to be good workers. It also means that we preparing them, like letting them know like what the situation is, and this is what we want.
Going off of that, I mean, the whole call to civics is really important if we want a successful world on big scale. You know, we also need to teach our kids about civics and ethics, morality. I'd like to see more of that. Going back to this whole notion of performance, if all we want our kids to do is perform, like how are we holding them accountable for things like morality and attention to things like civics, and how are we teaching that?
I think going on to what we talk about preparing them for what's happening, for preparing students for the global economy, and we were talking about this too, just it's that delicate balancing act between preparing them to operate in the system that currently exists and preparing them to be able to change in the system that we're going to. So I guess I would like to see that preparation include empowerment to show that they have a place in the system and an opportunity to be the people that decide where that system goes.
I think, like, in order to, like, have voice, you need to have access.
And I think in order for us to do all these things we're talking about, we really got to start looking at shared responsibility. Because what you say here about envisioning a school model and a culture built on shared responsibility and ongoing collaboration with colleagues. I mean, we need to be working together. We need to be reaching across grade levels. We need to be reaching across, from elementary to middle school to high school. We need to be connecting with each other across those lines, as well as I agree with Vanessa said, we need to be thinking outside of the box and be looking at what other countries are doing and how can we bring that in, because that's how we teach our kids that it's more than just me. We have to lead that way. We have to show that. We have to, like she says, open the school doors, not to close the door in the classroom, but shake it all up, change it. Because that's what we're talking about. We were talking. You've been mentioning a lot, man, about do we deal with this system the way it is, or do we shake it up and then say, hey, why are we even allowing that to happen? Let's question that. Let's teach them what that is, and then let's question: is there another way to look at it? Scary thing. I think that's a place where we looked at it.
And you talk about collaboration, I think, you talk about collaboration within schools and with teachers, but I think also, if it's going to work, I think looking to the larger community and college professions, I think is really important, because teachers alone and schools alone, I don't think can do it. So I think it's really important, and for society and other professionals, see us as more professionals, I think we have to bring them in and show them what we're doing and have them collaborate and have them help them.
And ask them for help.
I think that's a really good point. I'd really like to see, ultimately it'd be great to have integration between elementary, middle, high school, as far as like having students' academic career be thought about, talking to previous teachers and previous students. I mean, some of that stuff does happen, but I feel like there's just not nearly, I haven't seen nearly enough. Granted, I've just been student teaching, haven't really gotten into the really deeper communities in the schools of teachers, but I feel like it's just, I see kids that are failing dramatically, and schools just completely failing them, whether they're totally disengaged from school, that there's nothing happening. I just feel like that's just evidence that at that moment there's not enough going on between the teachers to prevent something like that, to bring that kid back.
And that collaboration also, goes to strengthening the teacher, bringing in supports from the community within the school. I guess I'm sort of tangenting here, but one line that struck out to me in the challenges, which is so often said, is about how many people leave the field prematurely, and partially because they're not having that support. We all came around and said our word, which I feel a majority of people would stay when going into the profession, hopefully. But then something in there happens that turns them away. I was reading a New York Times article online the other day about economic disparity in schools, and just reading through the comments as I was doing. And one of the comments was from someone who had taught, I want to say high school science or something, and he said in there, like, this is the worst profession in the world. You've got to, get out as fast as you can. If you're thinking about it, don't even. And it was just, yes, that's one lone voice, and often the dissenters are heard louder sometimes. But Yeah, it's just building those supports and bringing in the community, making it less the egocentric. That's, you had mentioned before, the egocentric of us as an individual teacher, but as a whole community and a whole village of teaching our children.
Also, I mean, like in teaching in a place like Brooklyn, it's like so diverse that it just seems to make sense to be looking at our country where some of our kids are actually just coming from. I don't know.
I think there's an issue of prestige at stake too. The way that the document says is that it is about isolation and about pay of teachers, but there's also a widespread notion that teaching children is somehow lesser, and that if you have a quality education, you wouldn't waste it by investing your time in teaching. And so, I mean, I think there needs to be an ideological shift towards, I mean, people we've been talking about, about social change and, our economy and, like, the structure of our society and improvement, like, justice. These things are, core to this movement towards a more just and moral society, and yet there's a disconnect between the work that teachers are perceived to do and the ends that many people wish to see in America.
Any final thoughts on this first page?
I guess I'm all for collaboration and, alternative scheduling. To sound a kind of skeptical note, some of this document seem to suggest that teachers should really do all these different things, which sounded great, but it seems like additional work for them. And so it says providing teachers time in the workday to collaborate together. So I'm wondering if that would be on top of what we're already doing. And, there was some mention of a longer work year. And so that's kind of my difficulty with this, is that it's not really saying how that collaboration would take place or if that would be an added burden. Because I feel like honestly, if teachers are asked to take more time from their other obligations and their other life, collaboration will start to be kind of a burden on them. So it needs to be done in a way in which it's facilitating teaching, facilitating reflection and teaching and planning in a way that's helpful for teachers, not only for students.
And just to touch up on what Gabriel said about having a shift in how teachers are perceived, I think that, I can't remember who said it over there, but somebody was talking about reaching out to other professions as well, collaborating with other professions, and I think that could be one way for teacher voices to be elevated in some way. Like if we're really talking to historians, and historians realize that teachers are teaching these amazing things, or if we're talking to doctors or, other professions.
This is such a Mills conversation. I really like it. And that's a really great thing. So thinking, you all are offering a really unique perspective because you are preparing to be in the classroom full time. And so we've done a series of, we've done over 100 roundtables with teachers based on this document, but most of them are practicing teachers. And we've done, some of those roundtables have been people who are preparing to enter the teaching profession. But I think you all offer a really unique perspective, even in the words that you shared. It is the reason that so many of us come in, like Scott, you said, it's a bit hard, but we may, 50% of us will leave. Now, hopefully not folks in this room, but, before 5 years, our first 5 years are over because for a variety of reasons. Some which are hopefully addressed in this document. But the same thing, Renee, the same thing that you're saying around, you don't want this to be in addition to what people already have to do, right? Because we know, I'm sure you all know, and in the time that you've been in your student teaching placements, plus whatever previous experience you have, you know that teachers work really, really hard, right? And so the hope is, just to give you a little background to the Secretary launched that conversation on Wednesday and kind of connected on Monday. The President announced his budget, and if Congress approves the budget, then he asked for $5 billion to go into transforming the teaching profession. And what that would look like is it would be a competitive grant program. $5 billion is not enough to transform the profession for the 3.2 million teachers in the country. But it would allow districts to apply for funding to do some of the things that are in here, right? So to think a little bit more creatively about how we pay teachers, or to think a little bit more creatively about how our school day is structured, or how, I was telling Vicki earlier that I had a teacher a couple days ago who said he was a 32-year veteran, and he said, my job description is the exact same as it was when I was a first-year teacher as it is now. Like, that's a problem. You know, I don't have those opportunities for growth. And so this would allow districts to kind of think about ways that we could give that 32-year veteran or anyone else who, you know, has a skill or experience that can actually better improve how our students are doing and what it's like to be in the classroom as a teacher, use that skill set. And so, so as we're thinking through this, Renee, I think the vision is that it's not to add to, but to change our existing structures so that you do have time to collaborate, and it doesn't mean like, oh, I have to pick up my daughter, so I can't collaborate. Like, I can't stay after school because my daughter has to get to my work out. So, you know, and then my co-teacher or the other person on the team is like, okay, call you later, or we won't talk about it. You know, so to try to think creatively about structures that we can put in our day to allow that to be possible. So as we move into this next section, what I'd love to do is read you, a lot of times what some folks say about this document is, you know, it doesn't have the specifics, I don't want the specifics, right? And part of this, the role of these roundtables is to help us think through that, because those specifics would be something that would be determined at the local level, right? So if, like, say, you all teach in Oakland Unified next year, and your teachers in Oakland, and Oakland applies for this funding, then they have to have a team of teachers who are helping to write that grant or helping to write that application. So what would it look like in Oakland, right? So what would the specifics be in terms of how our classrooms are structured or what school environment means? So as we move into this next section, if you find, like, I don't really know what, this is too vague, think about what you would like to see in that, because I will take that back. Because lots of folks have said, oh, I would like to see something more specific that says this. And I take that back to the people at the department to say this is what teachers are saying. So what we'll do for the next section is, if you look at starting on page 2, it's kind of broken up into 5 sections. So we have the classroom, which starts on page 2. We have the school day and school year, which starts on page 3. The school environment, which starts on page 4. That's a pretty short section. And then a pretty lengthy section, the career, which has a lot of subsections underneath in terms of preparation, career pathways. We're keeping that as one section. And then the appendix A, which is the sample teacher role structure. So what I'm going to ask is, I'm just going to take a poll and see which sections folks are most interested in. What you're going to do is we'll have about 15 minutes to break into smaller groups. And we can have up to 3 groups. Where you and your colleagues will kind of dive a little bit deeper into that section and come up with one thing that you think needs to stay, something that you think is really good in that section, one thing you keep, one thing that you would take out, something that you think misses the mark or does not need to be included, and one thing you would add, whatever's missing. So something you would keep, something you would take out, and something you would add. So if you take a minute to think about which section kind of maybe you made the most notes on, or you had the most thoughts around, and then I'll just take a quick poll. So I know it's always hard to finish these conversations, which is a good thing, I think, because you have a lot of time probably this year to have conversations about what it means to be a teacher and what the purpose of education is. But as you get into teaching full time, then that time feels so limited. So I would just encourage you all that when you are working in your classrooms next year, to find a group of folks that you can continue these conversations with, because they're crucial, right? They're really, we as practitioners, I think sometimes are so in our work that it can become very isolating. It's so nice to have opportunities to kind of step back and hear from each other and reflect. So I know it's hard to break up in that time. But what we're going to do in the next probably 10 to 12 minutes before we move towards our closure is just to hear hear from you all, what you would keep, what you would take out, what you would add. And we'll have a little bit of time for folks, even if you weren't in that group, but there was something you wanted to share about that section, we can have some open talk about that as well. So is there any group that would like to go first? You forward. Okay, who are you all?
We are the Appendix A, which is the teacher sample. Yeah. So we said one thing we would keep would be just sort of the general structure of the entire thing, having like graduated roles and having mentorship of teachers that are coming in and increased and incentive to be a more effective teacher, to continue along the path to being a professional teacher, if you want to be a major teacher leader. So we like that graduated role structure, kind of like residency idea of it, right? Okay, we're good there. One thing we would, I took the notes. So one thing we would drop would be, I think it was the language of professional teachers who were not seen as effective being exited from the profession. I think some of us just found the language exited to be pretty final in the way that maybe there could be, this is kind of a drop ad in a way. So maybe there could be something that could, instead of just exiting from the profession, just more specifics on what would happen to that person, because they have recourse to go back to being an original teacher, get greater support, greater mentorship, help that person to then be able to succeed as a professional teacher on a different time frame than this sort of lays out. So having an alternative route to continue along the path.
Can I ask you guys to follow up on that?
Yeah.
I just find this personally very fascinating, and so I want to know a little bit more about why do you want that? Why do you want somebody to have a route back in?
My thinking. Oh yes. So one thing, actually, I should take the credit on this one, but we likened it to either lawyers or doctors. Like if a lawyer does a terrible job, lawyer is fired, but lawyer can still get another job to get a firm.
Right.
Medical, if medicine person, a doctor receives some malpractices, may lose his medical license, he or she would then can go and reapply for it later down with sufficient training. None of us, as they always say, would say we want bad teachers in our school, but it goes also into the how are we determining effectiveness, which is a different conversation. And if there's someone who's teaching from their heart and trying to do a good job, but is maybe not, able to succeed as well, and then they're kicked out, what's the recourse for that person? Now, what are they going to do? I'm trying to think of the person, also the social aspect of that. Are they going to get a new job? If there's a way they can go back and start again, then that shows how committed they are. If they're kicked out and say, that's it, I'm done, or they say, no, I don't care about teaching, I'll go back to being an apprentice.
Kind of like what we're modeling for our students.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have, it's almost like a differentiated instruction, right? If you have somebody that just needs a little more time, it's basically saying that if a teacher cannot succeed in 3 years, then they can't be a good teacher. But I feel like if some teachers, sure, maybe some teachers will eventually never be able to be a professional or a mentor teacher or something, but it could be that you could be exiting teachers that with a little more help, a little more training, another year or two progressing in their life, whatever their situation is, could be then a great asset to the profession.
Well, it does say in the career section, it says dismiss teachers who are ineffective even with appropriate supports.
Right.
So I think
I guess I wonder if
it's
There's a difference between dismiss and exit. I think exit has a finality to it.
But there are also, it takes so much to get a school to run, so maybe you're not going to be the person who's a teacher, but maybe there are other ways for you to be involved in education and, people decide. I don't think that, this works for you to be the head teacher, but, is available to you.
Well, and I was just going to say, in terms of looking at differentiated teacher training and things like that, maybe a teacher is not effective in their first 2 years at, school A, but under a different principal with a different kind of demographic in a different situation, that teacher could potentially be an excellent instructor at school B. And so it's kind of looking at that and going off the analogy of, a lawyer gets fired from a firm, but then realizes that he's not into corporate law and he's really into family law. It's there's room for growth in many areas.
Instead of paying to work, you get paid to work, and I think that would attract more folks. I think that it would keep people in programs, and I think that it would help sort of just make the whole thing a little more cohesive. And I know that we might feel like we have more buy-in in our student teaching experience when we're not thrown in the middle of the semester, and they've already developed it, and the kids are like, oh, there's a new person, but they said it's like over a year, and you have a long-term relationship.
And one of the things we were talking about in the career pathways, I think that if there's a way to flesh out how, because everyone grows and everyone changes, so I'm one that's like re-entering. I've been in education, out of education, and I've never really, until I got here at Mills, I've never really felt support for all of who I am and what I can bring to a classroom. So if there's a way that, okay, if you've got this great musical background, and you don't necessarily teach music, but if there's a way that you can be supported. We were talking about like with college professors and being able to go and take a sabbatical. If there's a way you can, or as an artist, you can go and work and bring them and take students with you to work, and they can see that you bring that into the classroom. Things like that, how you can incorporate that so that you attract students who, think, wow, teaching is not just teaching out of this book, but I can, do this, and then you can retain people who, feel burnt out, or feel that, they're not, what's here is not, they're not fitting in that box, but that they have something to offer.
Or who are professionals, like art teachers who are professional artists and who need time to cultivate that in concert with their teaching.
It's one thing to, we were talking about, it's one thing to attract somebody who's already been, a professional in their field, maybe really excellent in their field to come teach, but you can bring them in, and then if you just say, okay, welcome to teaching now, you're great at your profession, and now teach this book for the next 20 years, cover to cover, because we're sure you'll be just great at teaching these kids these math problems or whatever out of the book.
Right.
That's not going to, something that will draw a lot of people in. I'm not saying that that's what this document is saying. I think that's a risk, though, that's not made more,
More clear. Yeah. Thank you. Who's next?
All right, we are the classroom. Okay, so what we would keep is the team teaching the class sizes. The small class sizes.
Not keep the part where it says that experienced and effective teachers should teach 150 to 200 students. It's very low.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a quick, on the class sizes, the small class sizes, so you're thinking of the piece, the part where it says, students with higher needs may be in smaller classes, is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Like that.
But I think all students should have those class sizes, not just the students with higher needs, because my assumption is, it's dangerous, is that the students who are high performing, who would eventually get into that level of 150 to 200 students, didn't get there because of they got there because of the more focused attention that they probably have in their smaller class sizes. That makes sense.
It doesn't say high performance is this naive. So I think high,
right, but I'm gonna grab that first.
So then that brings up then if they're high need, if they are needing more advanced, they are in small classes, then what about the middle class?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Those students kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Exactly.
Lower because they're really high. So
I don't know, smaller class sizes with more than one teacher, I think across the board is good news. I think all students need that attention and collaboration. One thing that we would add is there's a lot of language about having experts who have different degrees coming in, becoming teachers. And I think that's great, but the one thing that's missing from that is the pedagogical content knowledge. I'm sorry. But having, they might be experts in that field, they might not be experts in teaching that knowledge. So adding that component to it.
Well, I just want to say, kind of on that note, that it goes back to respect for the profession of teaching, right? And if we keep saying that, oh, all we need is experts to come in and teach, then really what we're saying is that teachers who train to be teachers aren't experts in their own.
Right, absolutely.
So,
And that could go back to what we were talking about, and, you know, allowing teachers to cultivate their own expertise in different fields in which they might already have quite a bit of expertise. So rather than think, bring experts in, maybe, you know, cultivate one aspect of the teacher that's expert at another subject, another content area.
I have to say, Open School for the Arts, where I'm student teaching right now, has implemented a lot of this stuff at the charter school, and their teachers, like academic core classes, are only taught before lunch, and that's all the teacher focuses on, is they have 2 to 3 classes, and that's it. And after lunch, they focus on working with other teachers on what they're going to be teaching, supporting students. They're available for the next, like the second half of the day for teachers to, or students to come in. And then the second half of the day, they have their own disciplines because it's a performing arts school, and the people who teach those disciplines are practicing, like directors, practicing artists. So there's like this, it's a very connected community there. And it's allowing the kids the time to be in those classes longer as well.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to add that you're really passionate about keeping is longer instructional periods, 90 to 120 minutes. But again, not for high need students, but across the board. Because teaching a class for 15 minutes, I don't even get a chance to like talk about any critical thinking. We read and then the bell rings and there's no discussion happening, and really how much teaching is going on that, how much learning is going on there. So yeah, longer instructional periods, absolutely.
Thank you. And our final group?
Yes.
You all are school-based leaders, right?
Yeah. Something we had talked about, like, kind of to start our discussion about how, and into what I was something I remember about having, allowing teachers to cultivate their other interests or expertise. So that was a concern for some teachers not having that time, if there's that longer school year.
Great. So there's mention of a longer school year potentially, and or a longer school day potentially, which is great in some ways because I think the majority of teachers do work a lot longer than they're paid, and so we want that to be compensated, but also making sure that there's flexibility for teachers who want to cultivate other interests or have other interests to come in and stay in.
I guess for me, like, I mean, I don't know, I haven't had that much time this year, but like I know that it'll like being a practicing artist will like feed into like teaching, so it's like not even separate, like it's like they're both part of the same profession or something.
Yeah. And we like that kids would be grouped and assessed according to skill, and like that it wouldn't just be by age group. But we also talk about how school is undeniably the social aspect. There's that art end. So there's that fear and concern about creating elite groups and competitiveness, and how our kids change from one grade or one school or one area in order to help them with those needs, and then how does that work with that social aspect?
Thank you. Any quick final thoughts on your part of this?
Yeah, I guess I want to be the other side of the coin for the school year. I'm really passionate, we believe we need longer years. And I think that students lose too much during these summer breaks, especially when Time article maybe last year about summer breaks are no longer really summer breaks. We go off to camp and explore, but summer breaks are time you spend in front of the TV or video games, and
Or they don't have a place to go.
or don't have a place to go. Yeah, and so you're losing so much. And I really think like teachers, I'm speaking for myself, I don't need 3 months off. 1 month, okay, that's nice, but, you know, it needs to be longer.
Which is why we're talking about having, I'm sorry, if I interrupted you, but that's why we're
Go ahead.
talking about having that flexibility within the school year.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say, I was coming from the point of view of saying, you know, I would just love to know that, you know, June didn't come around and I would leave the kids, weren't where we wanted them to be. But recognizing that there are people who just need time to cultivate other parts of their lives. And so maybe, you know, if there are going to be mentor teachers who aren't in the classroom all the time, they're going to need to share those classrooms. And so more room for part-time schedules.
I think that somewhere in here, I don't know where, a talk that speaks to this by saying, you know, some teachers would stick around in the summer and some teachers, you know, so that for the kids who maybe needed more help. So it may be that, you know, some teachers would work year round and some teachers wouldn't. I don't know where it says.
What does it do for the classroom environment, the cohesiveness, right, and the culture and community of the classroom when you're pulling the different teachers and how?
So then the curriculum should like really be strongly designed so that like you're thinking about the summer and who you're going to bring in the summer, and the teacher or the people who you're bringing in the summer like are like going off like what you've already done.
But even just in the social aspect, how do you use the curriculum, like the community feel of the classroom when you're like, all right, I can bounce, here's this new person that's going to take over.
Well, it shouldn't be like that.
Hopefully.
I was thinking about that a lot too when I was trying to envision what it would look like if the teacher had more flexibility during your day. Would it be, you know, like the one prep period they have or whatever is like, okay, music. Or there's a really different culture. Like, this is, I mean, the elementary school level especially, this is my class, I'm the teacher, we have our norms, we have everything, and then like, okay, you're going to music, and the kids like, aren't respectful all the time. And that teacher is like, oh, we have to like do music now. It's okay, it's thing, but it's like that community isn't developed, right? So it would have to look different. It wouldn't be like that. It wouldn't just be specialist. I think if there was like the idea of a co-teacher, just like they would need to be part of the, development.
I think it also disrespects, you know, it also shows a lack of respect for those, like, for the creative arts.
Yeah.
Yeah, specialists. It's basically saying, all right, do this thing
Well,
right now while I do something else. You know?
Absolutely.
I want to be aware of folks' time, and I know we're supposed to end at 2:15. If you have 5 more minutes, I mean, you guys. So how much time? Can we take 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know you wanted to share something, and Renee, and then we'll come over here, and then we'll work towards something. Yeah.
This is kind of out there, but I love like what you were saying, and also some supervisors have talked about how they had co-teaching, so they would both teach the same class and teach together. They both kind of tag team off each other during the class, not just like you take 1 week, I take 1 week, and that adds to accountability, because then you can have someone you build a trusting relationship, be like, that didn't go so well, or like that was awesome, I should do that, and you can watch each other do the same activity. I think that's so great. Kind of goes on this like continued mentoring, and that also can play into, you know, maybe one of them could work a month, and then they could go together for like 6 months, and then the other one would leave. So they both have some break, like a substantial break to do their own things, but then they still can have kind of this transfer. Be like, oh, I know these students. Give you a heads up on those students. So, I don't know, kind of out there. But
It's not actually out there, because that's how I taught for the last 5 years. So in New York City, that's one of the models they use for special ed. And so I taught in full inclusion class, so I was the general ed teacher. I co-taught with special ed certified teacher. And if you have the right person, it's awesome. But it's like a marriage, right? You have to be in really good communication, but it's phenomenal for kids because we had 30 students and there's 2 of us, so we can have a 1:15 ratio and parallel teach or do all kinds of things.
like police too. Police have like a meal apart.
So let's go on.
Issues I haven't talked about, really quickly. Just a question about technology and the language of technology in here was a little bit striking to me as like, I don't know, someone who is not totally enamored with technology, and the idea of just bringing in more and more and more and more technology and kind of dumping it in the classroom. And it said that it wouldn't take the place of a skilled teacher, but having taught at UC Berkeley and having had a discussion about cyber schools and like, I just think that maybe the language should be toned down a little bit. And I really didn't, I felt like the technology message was kind of something that didn't need to be said, or I don't know, I don't feel limited, but I just felt like it was kind of overwhelming, and that the money that, maybe a fear that the money that would be spent on technology would better be spent on actually training teachers how to teach and mentors how to mentor and things like that. So that was one thing. Another thing was just a question about the place of unions and job security. Because I know a lot of people are in charter schools, that I'm a product of public education and public education teachers, and I just really feel that the whole thing, again, of exiting teachers who are not effective without any kind of recourse is problematic, and I just don't see much in here about job security and about unions, and I had a question about that. So.
Totally. I want to share actually something, because that comes up, and I have to have it right behind my own magazine. This is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this report. It's came out maybe in December, I think. What was the reading? Or in February, I think. Sorry, I was like December. That's right, it was December. It is from the Commission on Effective Teachers and Teaching, and this is a commission that Dennis Van Roel, who's president of the NEA, the National Education Association, one of the teachers, National Teachers Unions, he got a group of teachers together from the union to think about the transformation of our profession, and it's kind of really strangely similar, a lot of things in here, as to what's in this document, which when we had seen this document, the Project Respect, they call this Project Respect. We had seen this document a million times in all its different iterations, and then we went to the launching of this, and we were like, this is kind of freaky, right? Because it was very similar. But this would be a good read to think, because I think it's a really important key. Like, teachers' unions are huge, right? And a huge part of us as a profession. And I'm thinking about what role what role we play in our unions and what role the unions play in our profession, I think is really important. So I've noted what you said, because you're not the first person to say it, but I'd also suggest, you can just, it's online on the NEA website, so.
Can I say something in response to what you were saying?
Yes, but can you hold on to it? I just want to come over here, and then I know Connor, you've been trying to say something in response to what Vanessa too, so Vanessa, Matt, sorry, Matt, I know there's 4 letters in it. Matt, and then Connor.
Okay. So a couple of things. The first one about the school day and school year, and I know there was a lot of talk about, across the community and different, making sure that things aren't competitive and, too explicit about, oh, that person moved up, but here I am, so here's that sort of thing. There isn't any mention of looped grades, which I've actually come to really like. Just this past year, learning about looped grades, because I never experienced looped grades. So that might be just a really, an alternative to it that might not be quite as, out there for some people. So I wanted to throw that out there, but the main reason why I originally held up my hand was something that I don't think that we had a chance to talk too much about for the Appendix A group, was as one of the things that I had noticed was the professional teacher section and the mentor teacher and teacher leader section was that it seemed that within the structure of promotion and, just being distinguished and all that, that the eventual goal would be for a teacher to end up teaching half-time in mentor teachers. And that kind of goes off to what Renee was saying earlier about how, there needs to be a focus on evaluating how people are mentoring and not just assuming that because they're a good teacher that they would be a good mentor teacher. And even really respecting teachers that choose to stay within the classroom full time and honoring that as also another way to be distinguished. And so kind of going off of that and going off of the whole idea about pushback from unions and all of that sort of thing, I was kind of looking at mentor teaching and the teacher leading as raising a question to me about what sort of response this might get and what sort of pushback this might get from the administration. Because it looks like mentor teachers and teacher leaders less important. You know, not to say that, and that I'm sure that the group that put this document together is aware that there's going to be a lot of pushback from a lot of different groups, but that would be one of the groups I anticipate, you know, reading this and being like, whoa, 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 now you're saying that administrators have no role in professional development. So.
Hold on. Sorry, just, okay, thank you.
The original reason I raised my hand was around the school day, extending the school year. And the thing that I wanted to say was that if that choice is going to be made, I don't necessarily think I don't start thinking that way, but I think it needs to reintegrate the things that we've been cutting out of our school today. So I asked my students today, I told them I was coming to this thing and said I'm going to be speaking to someone from the Department of Ed. I said, if you could say something, if you're at this meeting, what would you say? And I had to write it on a note card. And probably around half of the students said that they want their extracurricular activities back in school. They want music, they want foreign language, they want art, and that these students that I teach at Open High School, and so they really felt the budget cuts, and I think it would be a false premise to say that we should extend the school year, and because it's maybe a low-performing school or something, and whatever, they were just going to add math and history and science and English classes, because they want extra, and that's kind of the language too that I was concerned with in terms of the global, impending global economy, and the emphasis on explicitly on STEM in Race to the Top, and nothing against science and technology, engineering, and math, but it also needs to be inclusive of arts and foreign language, and that's coming from the students too, and they're it is.
Yeah, and that's what brings kids to school oftentimes, right? The kids that sometimes, they're not coming for English and,
Right.
sorry.
Yeah.
I love English, I know,
Yeah.
I'm a teacher, but for my kids that are struggling readers, it's like, that's not why I'm gonna come to school. I'm gonna come to school because I can perform in this, you know, or I can do this in my, so, yeah. Tyler, you're next?
Sure. Yeah, so this is, I'm a science teacher, right? And as far as what you were saying, Renee, is that it was, technology is useful in some ways, and so is data, and so is quantitative data, and so is collecting it. But it's also really seductive in the sense that we can't, just because there's data on teachers, what is the data? Is it the test scores? Is it the principal evaluations? Who's evaluating them in this system? And how does that come out? And I just feel like there's I feel like some of us may be responding to, or at least I'm responding to, is that there's almost like that little hint of an agenda towards pushing for more science, more math, more data-driven things, that just because that's where the money is, and that's what drives the global economy, and that's sort of at the expense of a more holistic evaluation system that could possibly be more effective to have teachers evaluating teachers. I mean, obviously testing student performance has to be quantified in some way just because it needs to be, but how do we do that? And I feel like some of the document kind of really, if we're talking about administrative responding value, but I feel like some of the document kind of almost like throws the bone to the administrator in the sense that the evaluation systems we've been talking about are cheap, quantitative, and easily done on a computer and quick. And that's just sort of like an administrative dream, right? You get to do like all this stuff, you get to sit there, you can kind of like parse out who's this student is 4, this student's a 3, this teacher's a 1, I just feel like there's that danger. I guess I'm just saying that I would like to see data and quantitative data on student performance be a big part of teacher evaluation, but I would also like to see teachers evaluating teachers and students evaluating teachers.
Teachers evaluating teachers, That's
Or students evaluating them?
Or even,
they do ask for like student surveys and things like that in terms of teacher evaluation.
right, I expect we need to pull from all the different pots.
Yeah. Let's go to Natasha, and then, did you want to share one thing too? Okay, so Natasha, can we wrap it? Can we move towards wrapping? And you guys can have this conversation without me here. You can keep it going. I'm serious, and I'll give you my contact information, so if there's things that come up and you want to email me or call me and tell me, then I will definitely take that.
I just kind of wanted to reflect what Renee said when I was reading the technology stuff. I sort of was like,
We have a lot of thoughts, which are really great in terms of, where we want our profession to go and what we want it to be like. And so the one thing I want to leave you with is one of my biggest takeaways. I've been in this fellowship for a little over 6 months, and one of my biggest takeaways has been that so much of what happens in schools is decided at a local level, right? And I was on the I went from one extreme to the other. Like, I was in my classroom in the Bronx, and now I'm in a cubicle in Washington, D.C., and looking at education at a federal level, which is like, took me 3 months to kind of wrap my brain around and figure out like, what's actually happening here. And it's exciting to me in a way because I think when I go back to New York next year, or later this year in the summer, I want to figure out how I can be more involved and more vocal in what actually happens in New York City schools, right? In New York City Department of Ed schools. And so wherever you are, and I know I was looking at the list, you guys are in so many different districts now, and wherever you end up next year, I would really push you to think about ways that you can already tap into existing groups, because there's a lot of groups out there already of teachers doing this work, but also how, if you can't find one, then you can create your own. Because there's a group of teachers in New York called Educators for Excellence, and it was literally created by 2 teachers from the Bronx who wanted to make some changes, and they tried to make the changes through their union, and they felt like they were getting stuck, and they were like, man, it's too many politics, we're just going to get a group of teachers together on our own. And these are teachers who now kind of have this national presence and are meeting with, the state commissioner, John King, and they just were part of this, they just reached an agreement, I don't know if anybody read this last night, in terms of teacher evaluations in New York State, and so it was a big contentious issue, and they finally reached an agreement last night. But this is a group of teachers who were like, we're going to organize, and now they have, thousands of teachers, maybe 1,000 or more in New York City, and they have a voice. And so a piece of what I want to encourage you guys to do is to continue these conversations, which sounds like you're already doing, but that in numbers, we're really, really powerful. And people actually listen, so I'll be sitting in department meetings with very high-level people, maybe like the secretary or other people, and they are talking about like, oh, E4E said this, which is Educators for Excellence, and it's Cindy and Evan, these 2 teachers that started it, and to me, I think that's pretty powerful, right? So I want to leave you with that, but I also want to leave you with one thing that we've learned this year too, is that a piece of advice we got is that someone said, you guys have to learn how to speak in policy. You have to speak the way the policymakers speak, right? And we're like, well, we're teachers, and we talk like teachers. And they said, well, people aren't going to listen to you here and listen when they talk. Which I understand, it's code switching and figuring out, like how you can get people to hear you. So everybody there talks about data, right? Data. Everybody says, like, so this research shows this and research shows that. I personally think that you can find any research to support what we think, but there. So we wanted to put together some research for you guys. So we compiled just a list of from different, you can say, so different surveys and polls and research findings that if you are interested in talking to people around, even at your school site, around changes that need to be made, you can find probably in this list of this research that supports what you think, right? And so we created that, so we passed this around. And then we also created kind of a brainstorm list of ways for teachers to be involved in these conversations. And we put it at a federal level, at a state level, at a local level, and then we just put outreach tips. So if you want to be continuing these conversations, there's different ways to do it. And I'm a resource, so one thing, I have the luxury this year of being in a place where I can read research and talk to people and have meetings with people from these wonderful national organizations, but most teachers don't have that opportunity. So I'm a resource to you as well, so I will email all of you probably at the beginning of next week, so you have my contact information, but I also have cards, which I've never had in my life, so I'm happy to pass those out. But the last thing I want to say is that the department also wants to continue these conversations, and there's 16 of us as teaching fellows, so obviously the 16 of us aren't going to get to the 3 million teachers in the country. But they want to know, folks, if there are people who are interested in continuing these conversations with their colleagues, their families, their friends, if you are interested, then you can put a star by your name, and somebody, it probably won't be me, but somebody from the department will reach out to you to kind of give you like kind of the protocol and things like that, if that was something that you're interested in doing. So I'll just leave this up here, and then if at the end you want to just start by your name, you
If you're
can.
interested in doing.
If you're interested in kind of continuing these conversations, like maybe you facilitate one with the teachers at your school, you know, or folks from another credentialing program, or anyone, just to get more teachers involved, because if Congress passes this, Congress passes the budget, and districts can apply, and it's something that you want to do, or you know your district's applying, and you want to have a voice in what they actually say, then all of this is kind of a way to say, like, well, actually, I've been working with the Department of Ed, and, you know, I know this, and I think that we should talk about, you know, I think that teacher evaluation needs to include this, it needs to be qualitative and quantitative, and should include student data and student surveys, and so that you can actually be involved in the conversation. So, we're really just here to mobilize teachers, so, I'll just leave this here, and I just want to thank you guys for spending an hour and a half with me on your Friday, and I hope that you were able to take something from this conversation, and I'm just going to ask really quickly if you can do a one-word loop around of where you, just something that you're thinking of now, or something that you're taking from this conversation, and that's it, we'll just do one word, and that'll be it. Connor, we're starting with you.
I'm starting this time. Yeah, I got lucky this time. I'll say progress.
Uphill. Community.
Exploration.
Duty.
Mobilization.
Potential.
Engaged.
Hopeful.
Thoughtful.
Inspired.
Possibility.
Love.
Totally gonna say possibility. Oh, resources.
Julie.
Oh, Julie?
And I'm going to